Recall that the demand is the ability and willingness of people to purchase a good at a specified price. Recall that change in quantity demanded refers to a change in the price of the good which enacts a movement along the curve. And so we say that's a change in price of the good. There are several different shift factors that would change the actual demand curve from demand to demand curve 1. We call these non-price determinants of demand. On our axis we have price in the vertical, quantity in the horizontal. We have demand as downward sloping, and an increase in demand is shown by a shift to the right. Increase in demand, increase to the right. To decrease demand, we shift demand to the left. And there's our second demand curve. You may be tempted at this point to say, well, to decrease demand you should draw a down arrow, and to increase demand you should draw an up arrow. But when we get to supply, shifting, increasing, and decreasing will have the same effect. Increase to the right, decrease to the left will work for both demand and supply. So don't get started shifting down and up. Shift left to decrease, shift right to increase. There are many different ways that people will describe what the non-price determinants are. I'm going to use the acronym BRIGHTS. The first one is buyers, the actual physical number of people that buy the goods. So if there are more people, demand goes up. If there are less people, demand goes down. Some key terms here might be population, or the number of people immigrating or emigrating into or out of a country might change. You're looking at the actual number of people. More people, more demand. Less people, less demand for all goods. The second in the acronym BRIGHTS is relational goods or related goods. Goods that complement each other. The price of those goods change. So it's the change in price of related goods. Examples might be hot chocolate and marshmallows, or gasoline and cars. So if the price of the relational good, let's say it's hot chocolate, if the price of hot chocolate goes up, what happens to the demand for marshmallows? So if the price of hot chocolate goes up, you're less likely to buy hot chocolate, and therefore have less of a need for marshmallows. So the demand for marshmallows decreases that related good. If the price of the relational good decreases, let's say it's hot chocolate again, more people will buy hot chocolate, and therefore more people might say, well, what goes with hot chocolate? I need marshmallows also. So if I bought the hot chocolate at a lower price, then I'm also going to increase my demand for marshmallows. And that's what we call related goods, the change in price of related goods. The third in the acronym BRIGHTS is income. If people have more money to spend, demand increases. If people have less money to spend, decreases. This can also include things like taxes, where if the government gives you a rebate, it increases your income, or if the government decides to increase taxes, you have less money. So if you have less money, demand decreases. So watch for other scenarios that might, in a way, be talking about income without saying just income level rises. The next one is taste. People's tastes change over time. So for example, there was a time when Furbies and the demand for records were extremely high. Today you're going to find a much lower demand for both of those products because people's tastes have changed over time. Some items that didn't have a high demand maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago might be things like Facebook games. When Facebook was first starting out, there was no demand for Facebook games because they didn't exist. But now when people's tastes change, we also have a change in demand which would increase or decrease the curve for demand. Maybe the toughest out of the group is expectations for the future, price. So if people expect that price in the future will go down, then people will buy less now, knowing that in the future I'll be able to get it at a lower price. If people expect the price in the future will rise, people are more likely to buy more now, increasing the demand curve now. That's what you'd be looking for, is what happens to the demand curve now. So for example, if people can expect that gas prices are going to rise during Memorial Day weekend, they may decide to increase their demand curve right before Memorial Day weekend or maybe a week ahead so that they pay less price for the same amount of fuel. The last one is change in price of substitute goods. It's goods that can replace each other. So if I'm looking to buy a Zune or an iPod, if the Zune goes on sale, and let's say I think it's a pretty decent product, we'll talk about elasticity later, but let's say I value each product equally. If the Zune goes on sale for $10 and the iPod is still on sale for $100, I'm much more likely to buy the Zune, so my demand curve for Zune goes up, people's demand curves as well, and my demand curve for the iPod decreases because of the change in price of a substitute good that I deem relatively equal. A lot of times you might say, well, I'm thirsty and I have two options. I can buy a Pepsi or I can buy a Coke. Remember that substitute goods can replace each other. So an increase in the price of Pepsi. Now I'm more likely, let's say if I think Pepsi and Coke are exactly the same, I see an increase in the price of Pepsi, I'm more likely to increase my demand curve for Coke. A decrease in the price of Pepsi, meanwhile, would decrease my demand for Coke because if Pepsi's cheaper, I'm going to buy Pepsi. I'm thirsty. I value the products equally or relatively equally. So that has a direct relationship in changing the price of substitute goods. So go ahead and pause this now and see if you can recall and maybe even give an example for each of what the acronym BRIGHTS stands for. Go ahead and pause it now. So here are the answers in order: buyers, related goods, income, taste, expectations for future price, and substitute goods. Various textbooks and even tests will call them different things. Your teacher may have different words or different acronym, but know that the relationships are still the same. You might call buyer something different, but we're talking about population. The number of physical people either increases or decreases. Same thing for substitute and related goods. A lot of times textbooks will put those two goods together, related goods and substitute goods. I feel the need to separate them out because related goods have an inverse relationship. An increase in the price of one good means a decrease in demand for the other, and so that's inverse. While a substitute good, if the price of one good like Coke goes up, then the demand for Pepsi goes up with it.